Hello and welcome to Chapter 2 of Baron Trump's Marvellous Underground Journey. Now each chapter begins with a synopsis or a summary of what is in the chapter. So here we have Don Fum's Mysterious Directions. Bulger and I set out for Petersburg and thence proceed to Archangel. The story of our journey as far as Ilich on the Ilich, Ivan the Teamster, how we made our way northward in search of the portals to the world within a world, Ivan's threat, Bulger's distrust of the man, and other things. And that is actually a fairly accurate description of the chapter. Now this first paragraph is entertaining. According to the learned Don Fum's manuscript, the portals to the world within a world were situated somewhere in northern Russia, possibly, so we thought, from all indications, somewhere on the westerly slope of the upper Urals, but the great thinker could not locate them with any accuracy. The people will tell thee, was the mysterious phrase that occurred again and again on the mildewed pages of this wonderful writing. The people will tell thee. Ah, but what people will be learned enough to tell me that, was the brain-racking question which I asked myself, sleeping and waking, at sunrise, at high noon, and at sunset, at the crowing of the cock, and in the silent hours of the night. The people will tell thee, said learned Don Fum. Ah, but what people will tell me where to find the portals to the world within a world? And then it goes on to characterize Baron Trump on how his mind works, and he talks about how he chooses to just wear the Russian garb so that he won't be bothered about a passport. But the reason why he doesn't want to be bothered with the passport is because his mind shouldn't be reduced to have to think of such unimportant things. Points out, my train of thought constantly disturbed by inquisitive traveling companions, a very important thing to me, for my mind possessed the extraordinary power of working out automatically any task assigned to it by me, provided it was not suddenly thrown off its track by some ridiculous interruption. For instance, I was upon the very point one day of discovering perpetual motion, when the gracious Baroness suddenly opened the door and asked me whether I had pared the nails of my great toes lately, as she had observed that I had worn holes in several pairs of my best stockings. And in this line here is just good because it says Castle Trump. It was about the middle of February when I set out from the Castle Trump, and I journeyed night and day in order to reach Petersburg by the 1st of March, for I knew that the government trains would leave that city for the White Sea during the first week of that month. And I found other parts of this chapter to be important because it indicated where the story took place and where the story takes place if they should find the opening to the world within a world may be of interest to us. So he describes the journey. Our route lay almost directly to the northward for several days, at the end of which time we reached the shores of Lake Ladoga. This we crossed on the ice with our sledges, as a few days later we did Lake Onega. Thence by land again we kept on our way until Onega Bay had been reached, crossing it too on the ice, and so reaching the station of the same name, where we halted for a day to give our horses a well-deserved rest. From this point we proceeded in a straight line over the snowfields to Archangel, an important trading post on the White Sea. Then he points out, according to the learned Don Fum's manuscript, the portals to the world within a world were situated somewhere in northern Russia, possibly, so he thought, from all indications, somewhere on the westerly slope of the upper Urals, but the great thinker could not locate them with any accuracy. The people will tell thee, was the mysterious phrase that occurred again and again on the mildewed pages of this wonderful writing. The people will tell thee. Ah, but what people will be learned enough to tell me that? And so Baron Trump is just letting this rack his brain over and over again. And so he leaves with his dog Bulger and 2 servants, and he travels on. And then it has this picture of departure from Castle Trump. It's an interesting illustration. And so now we have more geography. My course now carried me up the river Dwina as far as Solvitchegodsk. Thence I proceeded on my way over the frozen waters of the Wichita River until we had reached the government post of Urensk, and from here on we headed due east until our hardy little horses had dragged us into the picturesque village of Ilich on the Ilich. And then once he got there, the 2 servants he had were then returned, and he had to gain a new servant, which was this guy Ivan, who was a teamster. And this is in Archangel. Oh, and what's interesting is Baron says, I had become very much attached to them, and so had Bulger. And after their departure, we both felt as if we were now, for the first time, among strangers in a strange land. But I succeeded in engaging, as I thought, a trustworthy teamster, Ivan by name, who made a contract with me for a goodly wage to carry me 100 miles farther north. But not another step farther, little Baron, said the fellow doggedly. I was now really at the foothills of the northern Urals, for the rocky crests and snow-clad peaks were in full sight. So we have a line here. For a low, mysterious voice came a-whispering in my inward ear that somewhere in that awful wilderness, I should one day come upon the portals of the world within a world. All right, then he goes on to describe Ivan's horses, how he treats his horses, and he says he treats them really good. How at first they're all great friends, but Bulger's not really trusting him that much, and how they were sent off from the whole village. The whole village came out to see off Ivan, his family, his father, his mother, his sisters and brothers, the wife and children, uncles and aunts. They all waved with kerchiefs, bon voyage. And then Baron was on the journey, and he kept repeating the mysterious words of Don Fum. The people will tell thee. The people will tell thee. Goes on to describe the journey, and he's just talking how some of the terrain was difficult. And then he says, there had been many trumps, but never one that had thrown up his arms and cried, I surrender. And should I be the first to do it? Never, not even if it meant never to see dear old Castle Trump again. And so as Ivan said, he would take him 100 miles, but not a mile further. And when they get to the end, he says, hey, little Baron, I cover the last mile of the 100 today. If thou would go any farther north, you must hire another teamster. Do you hear me? Silence, said I sternly, for the fellow had broken in upon a very important train of thought. Bulger, too, resented the man's insolence and growled and showed his teeth. But, little Baron, listen to reason, he continued in a more respectful tone, removing his cap. My people will expect me back. I promised my father. I'm a dutiful son. Nay, Ivan, I interrupted sharply. Curb that tongue of thine, lest it harm thy soul. Know then that I spoke with thy father, and he promised me that thou should go a second 100 miles with me, if need were, but on condition that I give thee double pay. It shall be done, and on top of that, a goodly present for your Golupchka. Little Baron, thou art a hard master, whimpered the man. If the whim took thee, thou wouldst bid me leap into the giant's well just to see whether it has a bottom or not. St. Nicholas, save me. Nay, Ivan, said I kindly. I know no such word as cruelty, although I do confess that right seems harsh at times, but thou wert born to serve, and I to command. Providence hath made thee poor and me rich. We need each other. Do thou thy duty, and thou will find me just and considerate. Disobey me, and thou will find that this short arm may be stretched from Elitch to Petersburg. So then Ivan started drinking, and he was angry, and from this point on, he wasn't happy, and he was basically trying to sabotage the whole journey. And then a foreshadowing line comes from one of the villagers. He says, Look out for that driver of thine, little Baron, whispered the tavern keeper. He's in a reckless mood. He'd not pull up if the giant's well were gaping in front of him. St. Nicholas have thee in his safe keeping. So that's the second mention of the giant's well. And I think the repeating of the giant's well is part of the people will tell thee, because they continuously mention the giant's well. And that concludes chapter 2.